Sup everybody, this is the Starship ACG and it's my continuing mission to explore strange new games, to seek out titles new and old, and to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today we're taking a look into DLC that almost no one actually knew was being made, and that's the DLC for Star Trek Bridge Crew known as Next Generation. Let's see if Next Generation takes the title a little bit farther than where the original game went, which is usually finding itself almost always the application of heavy firepower. And let's be honest, it really always was, even if you were dip diving and dodging and attacking shields, then engines, then weapons, or even at times reducing signature. Much of the game boiled down to phaser humping an enemy ship with the business end of God rays hot enough to burn the balls off Wolverine anyway, and hoping you did it before helmsman Glaucoma smashed his starship into the side of something because he didn't have his sensor canes engaged. With all that weight on its mighty shoulders, here comes the DLC for Star Trek Bridge Crew Next Generation. It's out now for PSVR at $14.99, and it's for Oculus and Steam VR systems on July 21st, which I'll talk about later. Let's see how it does, shall we? So without further ado, this is my review for Star Trek Bridge Crew Next Generation. Yep, still dying when you give up trying an incredible AI flying. As always, this is a DLC review. While I'll talk about and cover elements of the original game, this is going to be mostly based on that DLC. My other review will be in the links. Graphics are up first. As this is currently on the PSVR, not much has really changed in the main game proper. It can be played both in non and in VR versions, with the VR versions doing a pretty good job of reflecting the interiors or exteriors of starships that are seeing the last of their days under a Borg cube suppressing fire. It's not going to win awards, that's for sure, but things like excellent reflections across the panels and accurate bridges do an incredible job of making you feel like you're in the moment, and sometimes when you're in those outer camera views, it can look really good. And when you have a title like this, making sure that the fiction feels functional within the gameplay is something that really matters. Take, for instance, the jelly bean encrusted innards of the original series Enterprise. It looks like someone bedazzled the entire insides of a starship, which was actually how it looked in the original. Or even the almost race car-like futuristic feeling of the Aegeus with sleek menus and light gray and blue stylings. But to me, the Next Generation Starship Bridge really does do something great here. It fleshes it out even when you realize quickly that anyone who manned tactical would have quads like a motherfucker from sprinting up that damn bridge section in the back. Now, LCARS is fully outfitted here, changing the way a lot of the stations on the Next Generation Enterprise feel. And of course, while everything from the bridges are replicated exactly the way they should be, it's also got the new enemies, next generation enemies like the Romulan and the Borg, who seem to have discovered that the more basic looking a ship is, the more damage it apparently does. It also has a number of little issues that have cropped back up. First, the textures. Now, inside the ships is fine, but I'm pretty sure the entire game is based in some kind of land where sugar-free gelatins replace deep space, because the various elements really look horribly low-textured at times, especially a lot of the asteroids. But even more so the Borg cube, which at times looks like it showed up and then assimilated a bunch of textures from a friggin' PS2 game. Overall, though, a lot of those things sort of fall to the wayside as you continue to play. It is noticeable, though. This is the same Star Trek game as the original, but with a number of new enemies, some new graphical effects here and there, and of course a perfectly replicated Next Generation Enterprise, which I'm sure a lot of fans were actually looking for. And of course that brings us to sound, music, and voice.
Stardate 2258.237. The USS Suribachi has discovered significant Romulan activity and requested our support. We're en route now.
Warp coils ready.
Charged.
We're showing on their sensors. I'm reading multiple hostile contacts.
Vector aligned. Course plotted.
Captain, we're being hailed.
Staying with
Opening channel.
Shields up.
Engaging target. Solid hit.
And let's do sound first. So building in the original game's excellent surround sound and heavy use of replicated samples from the original, you do have this effect, feel, and envelope that comes through in both the original game and the DLC. Where the original game really excelled, the DLC continues on from that. The hum and whirl of atmospherics of the old Enterprise really do play out dramatically different from the Aegeus and, of course, from it, Next Generation's Enterprise. And depending on what weapons you have, all the sounds are tonally accurate. Also, the game really does sound very well in VR, especially with PSVR's slightly more advanced audio capabilities that they have for 3D sound. That did elevate it a bit. Voice. Yeah, so it's not a great deal that's been added here, or at least will take a long time to pick apart. The original's use of the various actors from the shows and films made the transition from those into video game form a little bit better than I think I would have expected, and you don't get the comedian on a stage trying to replicate the vocal patterns of a well-known Starfleet captain kind of moments. The original did a pretty good job, and the DLC builds on that, if only a little bit. Gameplay, and a bit about the story. So Next Generation offers a number of changes to the gameplay, really. Some of them are in-game, regardless if you get the DLC, like an increase in the flexibility of the main dynamic missions, as well as some small options to the original included ships. Then it piles into that some new enemies, new sequences of events, new mission types, and of course, adds the Next Generation Enterprise with its beloved LCARS interface, like I've talked about before. Now, while the original game started out with a series of constantly escalating situations across the local sector, the meat of Next Generation is added when you really engage in some of the additional later missions, and especially when you take on the random missions that, while they're in the first game, sometimes they made you ask yourself why your 5-year mission, where you're the only commander of a starship boldly going to places to hump green chicks, everywhere you went, there were the same 3 goddamn sensor buoys. While not completely gone in the DLC, a good deal of it has actually been improved. Dynamic missions are far more spread out and have a larger number of random events, and you're going to notice that pretty much right away. Borg, Romulan, questionable age-old destructive devices, and more start to sort of come out of the woodwork as you play. Also, it does seem like there are more enemies. It wasn't unknown for me to engage with 4 or 5 starships pretty much right away, with a couple more inbound, and when you're facing off against the Borg, that can actually get pretty epic. And of course, that's because the Borg can slowly figure out defenses against your attacks, and taking them out can be an exercise in futility where you're bashing your head against the wall of operations panels and its various choices, as well as understanding when to retreat. And one of the game's major missions is exactly that, because the Borg are some regenerating bastards, and you can't really do a ton of damage to them until you collect items from various different places and then combine them. Now, that is true. In a bid to protect the galaxy against the Borg, Starfleet built a super powerful item, then promptly cut it into pieces like a goddamn D&D quest. But make no mistake, there's a number of non-expected ways you can take out the Borg as well, many of them supposedly still to be discovered even by the dev team. And that brings us to the newest edition, which isn't just the Next Generation vessel or the changes to some of the others or the new enemies, but the operations station, where each ship has had some adjustments, like the ability to stand down on the original Enterprise and offering a bit more flexibility. Operations on the Next Generation Enterprise is a moment of sheer panic when you see it, because when you're in the middle of the heat, 10 secondary crews that await you in that mode, each with 3 open sections, from thrust controllers to main engineering to scanners, that can each have 3 people assigned to it. And for each person you put inside there, they get a perk for that system. For instance, the generator room may get shield modulation if you add 1 crew member. It gets a shield buff if you add 2, and another passive perk if you get 3. Sadly, you only have a total of 5 crew members to move around, meaning nothing's ever perfectly set up. I don't think I've ever felt this stress watching a little blue dot travel lickety-split through the bowels of the USS Gone for Good as he tried to get to the engines to fix the warp core while my shields petered away continually, and then the Borg sent up a futuristic WannaCry virus over to my systems. It changes the feeling of the game to something that is a bit more tense than the meat puppet fests of the original title, which, while I actually enjoy, doesn't really hold a candle to a lot that I saw here. Operations still does have a number of the same options that the other ships still have. That can, of course, make some of those other stations feel a little bit like a letdown or absolutely relieving, depending on how you think about it. Everything is unlocked for all the starships, so you can take the original Enterprise against the Borg and see how they fare, or the Aegis, starships that by many would be considered not a good match even on the best of their days, and all manner of space-based traps can be used against enemies, from anomalies that cause other ships to lose all ability to fight back, to celestial events that can absolutely change the tide of a battle if you pay attention. The VR experience, though, is really nailed, and the flexibility of the new systems and new enemies do require a bit of out-of-the-box thinking that really wasn't in the original. But let's talk a little bit about the AI, because nobody gets teleported 500 times without some mental problems, and frankly, that's what happens with Helmsman Rua or whatever the hell his name is. I don't know how he got on a starship bridge. His version of engaging enemies includes full speed ahead and ignoring turning. Oh, and the enemies, because he's too busy smashing into rocks, other ships that are smashing into rocks, and occasionally a satellite. I mean it, this guy has so many issues. I don't really understand why, but he also can't fly very well in 3D space, which would probably help in a friggin' Star Trek game. So if you tell him to engage with the enemy, who's Z plus 50, there's a good chance you're going to be flying below them right out of phaser shot as the helmsman looks dumbfounded at his screen for just a moment, then starts hammering buttons like no one's going to notice he smashed into the only thing within 10,000 miles of anything else. Also, yes, the game is playable with your controller, and it works for the most part, but its slow interface means using various lesser-than controls to flick between the hundreds of hot, sticky buttons that the game has. As a package, Star Trek was always a very good social experiment in VR gaming, and in a way it offered, especially with dynamic missions and the various different crossplay opportunities, a lot as a platform for people to jump in and experience VR for the first time. And here with this, you get some excellent DLC that's for Next Generation, which a lot of people were waiting for, and honestly, its representation is pretty damn good. Fun factor. So if the original Enterprise is a little like, let's say, a Mustang convertible, the Aegis is like a Lambo, then the next generation Enterprise is a little like a Tesla. It's advanced to the point, a trump in most everything else, but it also offers that low-end kick in the pants that's a bit surprising. Truly is unique on the new Enterprise with the new systems, and the ability to leap into the extra scenarios with any of the ships is always excellent, and that content is spread out and isn't restricted in any way. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system. For $14.99, this is absolutely worth purchasing. There is a lot to like here. There's a lot of changes that everybody are going to get, which is great. But that new Enterprise and the new engineer system really does show what the game can do, and the elevation of the systems in a VR title that still allows for social interaction and maybe a lighter gathering than, let's say, Elite Dangerous or maybe Star Citizen will, but really does do a good job focusing the fiction of Star Trek into a game and making it digestible for most people. So that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. Maybe check out Reddit or Twitter. You can always become a patron on the Patreon website as well. The link will be in the description. That's a place where you can come. We have an excellent community. You can jump in. You can talk about role-playing games. You can play video games with others and have a great place to discuss. And with that, I leave you my 12th grade ode to Deanna Troi and, of course, Star Trek itself. Oh, behold thine wonderfully textured stars, as helmsman asshat plays bumper cars. Never before has one flown so true into everything but failed to catch you. It's a good thing that Klingons have a saying, Machok Viatuk Aviain, which, translated roughly for all you chumps, is Picard always looks like he has to take a dump. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.